I used 3 different techniques to make this mini pop. Can you guess which ones? Stay around to the end of the video and see if you got it right. This mini is almost 4 minis in one. Around the knight's feet there is naked ladies. Yeah, why not? One of them seems to be like chilling out, and one of them is reading this enormous book, and the third is kind of offering our lion knight something, or maybe she's worshipping him in some way. Maybe we have to start by reading up on our mini before we start painting it. If you don't already know, this is of course one of the mini bosses that you can meet and face up against in the game of Kingdom Death Monsters. 3 brother generals command the vast armies of the Golden Entity's domain, each imbued with a different temperament and a strong will of their own. The middle brother is the most attached to the human industry and artistry. He cultivates a courtly, civilized appearance and a graceful swordsmanship, surrounding himself with human thralls, allowing them to enjoy their short and tragic existence in his awesome presence. Incapable of emotion, the Lion Knight seeks to understand the world around it through its bizarre, self-serving stage productions. Between performances, it is a distant husk, unaffected by the normal world. When the time comes, actors are gathered by the Lion Knight's masked routine to join it on stage. There it hopes to capture and vicariously experience the excitement, fears, and ultimately their deaths. However, it remains up to the survivors to decide whether or not they stick to their scripts. One of the things that I love the most about the Kingdom Death minis is that they really beg to be put in a somber atmosphere. It's almost like every piece is a small diorama instead of something that will be used on a gaming table. And with this in mind, I start to strive towards a very clear atmosphere, a teal and magenta scheme. I don't care at all about smoothness. In this stage, it's all about big value jumps. By doing it this way, I can make sure that I have great contrast right off the bat, and that I place my highlights right according to the volumes of the mini. This is of course very easy if you start off from a black primer like I did here, because you can just place the brightest colors directly where you want it, and with a quick wet blend of my shadow color, in this case a dark violet one, I can just put that in between the black primer and the bright highlights, and you smush my brush around, making an interesting transition. The parts that I don't reach will stay black, and that's exactly how I want it. One thing I do care about is my brush strokes. I try to place them deliberate in the direction that will fit the form of the surface best, like on this back. When the first layer has dried, I paint a brighter layer on top on a smaller part of the surface. On the skin, I go from a desaturated skin color with a lot of infused purple and end up with sunny skin tone highlights that contains yellow, the contrasting color of the purple. Even if it's desaturated colors like this, the contrast stays the same and makes it stand out. The last thing I do to blend the skin is to use the airbrush and spray a diluted magenta from underneath on all of them girls. This will not only make the skin more interesting and more blended, this will also make them fit in the atmosphere that I have planned. You'll see what I mean soon when I paint the base. For the text of the book, I just go in with scribbles with a black ink. The only thing to really make sure of when painting this kind of freehand is not to use a small brush, but a brush that can hold a lot of paint in the bristles. Of course, it has to have a great tip too. But if you make sure that it can hold a lot of paint, you won't have to go back to the palette all of the time, and the flow of the paint is great. base is where we really cement the atmosphere of the scene. And this mini comes with a freaky face base. Very Kingdom Death. These bases come with a lot of raised areas as well as deep crevices, perfect for making a base with a lot of contrast. I start from the same black primer as I did with the girls. I then overbrush with a dark blue color, not dry but moist, but not dripping wet so that the color ends up in the crevices. Then I just go brighter and brighter towards a teal and focus on the middle area of the base. I'm not afraid to punch this up a lot. I know that it will dull down when it's dried. I finish highlighting the raised areas with a quick dry brush of Glacier Blue. Then it's time to take care of the cracks between the faces. And we will not go dark here. We will instead go bright and create contrast with color instead of value. I start by mixing white ink with a lot of flow improver to really lower the viscosity of the paint. Viscosity is how well a paint flows. Water have a low viscosity and honey, for example, has a very high viscosity. I use flow improver instead of water to have the paint stay intact and for the pigments to not break apart. When the paint flows just about right, I use a brush and place the white ink in the crevices all around the scene. An oil wash would be absolutely easiest tool here, but if you don't want to wait for that to dry, with a little work, acrylic ink is also workable. I go over all the white lines with the magenta filter through the airbrush. The same magenta I filtered over the skin of the girl earlier. What I want to achieve is an ominous magenta glow in between the gaping faces. Just like when I painted the blue, I go darker on the edges of the base and let the middle area be brighter. I don't care about overspray, since I want it to feel like a glow that would affect the surroundings. But when I'm done, I do go in with the brush and brighten up some of the faces that I feel have lost some definition. If you're struggling to coming up with color schemes, I got a great trick for that. There's a video that I made earlier featuring this KDM Mini. The video should be in the corner right about now. Finally, it's time for our lie night. On the cape, I start with a fitting purple color. Since the color is naturally translucent, I work with brushstrokes straight away. For the armor, I start with a jade green. This will work great as a base for the teal that I have planned for. Lastly, I base coat the gold with an orange brown tone. To make sure the Mini is readable from afar, I make sure that I have separation by alternating between jade and gold. If I had painted the whole armor gold or jade, I would have made my work so much harder. By doing this, it's much easier to see where one detail ends and another one starts. For the cape, I do starch value jumps as I place textured lines where I want my highlights. This do look like dog shit, but bear with me, we'll get there. Next step is to airbrush with my highlight color on top of the lines. This takes some time and you can decide how much of the lines you want to show through at this stage. When the brightest parts are set, I re-establish my shadows by airbrushing the darker violet shadow color that I've chosen for my scene. Next up is highlighting the armor. I start by edging, yeah, you're right, Simon, all the different parts of the armor. By doing this straight away, I make it readable, and then I can tackle each part individually. Placing intermediate tones in between the base color and the highlights, as well as darker colors, and black lining for even more separation. For the gold, I instead go slowly from the base color towards a yellow, making sure that I don't highlight the whole area, but instead deliberately choosing where the bright areas will be and where I will leave the base color. I layer up and make sure that I place the colors on a smaller and smaller surface. If you like what I do here, there's a number of ways you can support the channel. First and foremost, there is affiliate links down below in the description. You can buy minis from Creature, Caster or Big Child Creatives, and by following my links, I get a small kickback. There is also affiliate links to Amazon if you need any of my tools or gear that I use. Besides that, I do have a Patreon. The link is also down in the description, where you will also find a link to my Discord server, where you're more than welcome to come and hang out. Both the gold and the jade get the same final highlight of ice yellow. Even if this isn't smooth at all, since I placed so many intermediate tones on a very small area, the ice basically fills in the blanks and makes it smooth out of far. Let's look at this for a second. If I place one tone here, let's just leave it at that. That isn't going to look very smooth even from afar. If we then put a intermediate tone in between those two, that goes a long way. But the more tones of intermediate colors we put in between all of these transitions, basically what we're doing here is blending. But it's another way of thinking of it maybe. It's time for our lion's face and his beautiful mane. I want my mane to be white in the end, but I can't start off just painting white. Like with the armor, I have to have a lot of intermediate tones. I make sure to place the first layer on top of the black primer, not covering all for the best effect. Instead, focusing on covering all the strands of the mane. When this is done, I place highlights, and there is a long way to go until we can place a white color in the end. The placement of the highlights are just as important, if not more important, than a slow progression in value. The highlights should be placed on the top of the curls, as well as at the bottom of the strands. This will sell the reflective nature of the hair. Because the mane is white, it should also reflect some of the colors of the scene, since white is a very submissive color to atmosphere. So I glaze in some magenta in the lower part of the strands. As for the face, I start with the same skin color that I used for the girls in the beginning, making sure to not cover all of the face in one go, so that I can use the black primer underneath as black lines for separation. I move up in values with intermediate skin colors, and the goal is to end up with the same sunny skin color that I used on the girls, of course containing the same tone of yellow. For the eyes, I mix a gray color on my palette and paint in the white of the eyes with this. Then I place the iris with a blue dot, and after that I place a pure white dot for the final sparkle of the eyes. I add some final details and paint free-handed symbols on the crotch tabard. The last thing I do is to place the girls on the base, where I think they would fit the best. So it's time to see if you guessed right. What 3 things did I focus on to make this mini pop? Minis are small, so paint small. Use the biggest brush you can handle, but be sure to paint deliberate. Paint small. Intermediate tones. The more tones you have in small areas, the better it will look in the end. The spectator's eyes will fill in the blanks and make a transition smooth the more intermediate tones there is on that surface. And lastly, color choices and where to place them. To make the mini readable on the gaming table, I make sure to place my colors next to each other. Instead of painting different details with the same kind of tones, I go like jade, gold, jade, gold. I do this so it's much easier for our eyes to distinguish the details from one another on the mini. The next time I'll paint a Kingdom Death mini, I will be painting this one. For those who know what this is going to be special. If you want me to do a video about that one, please write down in the comments if there is anything in particular that you want to see. So without further ado, the stage is set, the performance can begin, curtains up for the Lion Night.